Out here exploring in the woods today by the Hillsborough River. It's a beautiful place. Many layers of history in this area as well. Interesting, in the 1500s, Hernando De Soto, a Spanish conquistador, in his expedition came through part of these areas. And they traveled throughout Florida in that time in search of gold, land, and other treasures that they could discover. It was the New World. And in fact, Hernando De Soto was given La Florida at the time, which that's what it was known as by the King of Spain. And before he made his expedition here, he spent a good part of his fortune recruiting an army, weapons, ships, just getting everything organized for this expedition. And the idea was that he would regain his fortune by coming here and discovering gold and other treasures. Along the way, he encountered various tribes throughout Florida that had already been living here for hundreds and thousands of years, many generations of them. So over time, this area has seen so much history, and today it's a beautiful wilderness to explore. You can just sense the past roaming through these woods. Really peaceful place. And it wasn't always so peaceful. Look at all these areas dug up here in the woods. Rooted up by wild boars. Seeing a lot of these areas here rooted up with some of the wild pigs in the area. It's interesting. They're all around here, not native to Florida. They've been here for hundreds of years. You see, De Soto and the conquistadors actually brought over these pigs as a food source for their expeditions. So the boars that you see today all throughout the wilderness areas here in Florida are descendants of those pigs that were brought over originally from those explorers. And they cause a lot of damage to the environment here, to the landscape. It's an invasive species, so you often see many of them here. Another thing to consider, just imagine all these pigs in the Florida wilderness during those times, and natives would have never seen them before. And these pigs would have quickly spread across the territories, rooting up the soil and destroying many of the crops that natives planted for generations. So in those times, they were very destructive to the environment and landscape. Now, during the 1500s, the Tocobaga Indian tribe inhabited these areas. They were the ones living all throughout these places by the river and general vicinity when Spanish explorers arrived during that time. This tribe existed somewhere between 900 AD up until around that time period, the Spanish explorers in the 15 to 1600s. You see, when they arrived here, many of them brought diseases and wiped out many of the tribes in the area, included the Tocobaga Indian tribe. In fact, after 100 years of exploration here by the Spanish, the tribe was extinct. For the 1500s and the conquest of a new world, this place was inhabited by many tribes for hundreds and thousands of years. They traded with each other. There was different cultures. You can see a lot of evidence from that, from artifacts that were discovered in places such as Indian mounds and pottery. You can see the different patterns on them, which indicates different time periods and cultures of Indians that were living in certain areas of Florida long ago. Now, certainly these tribes over the centuries would have had conflicts, disputes over land, territories, resources. But once the area began to be explored by the outside world in the 1500s, you had many explorers, various countries coming here, also in search of resources and land, treasures. There was much conflict. So eventually, all the tribes were wiped out. Up until the 17 and 1800s, you had tribes coming in from other areas of the country as well into Florida, which formed the Seminole Indians. So various layers of history, learn about and discover all throughout these areas of Florida. In the 1800s, not too far from these areas, were many conflicts with the Seminole Indians. There were 3 Seminole Indian wars, and it was all part of trying to remove the last of the natives of these areas out of Florida as more settlers were coming into the area. So there was a lot of conflict, violence during that time. Not too far from here was an old military road that was used also by the natives, but during the time of the Seminole Indian Wars, it was utilized as a transportation route through the area, which connected many military forts. And not only did the Seminole Indians utilize this road, it's speculated that Hernando De Soto also traveled along part of that route, which was a old Indian trail at that time used by the tribes in the area, which would have been the Tocobaga Indians in this particular area by the river here. This is interesting. Here by the river I can see part of a mound formation, and it appears to be quite large. It goes back into the woods there for a little ways. Interesting seeing this mound formation here in the woods on this beautiful river. Now, natives built many mounds, village sites all throughout these areas over the centuries. They vary in size and shape, and many have been eroded away or destroyed. And there were various kinds of mounds as well, used for different purposes over the years. Often see a lot of shell middens along these rivers where the natives deposited shells and other debris, helping to form the mounds over long periods of time. On this particular area here, I'm not seeing a lot of shells. And shellfish was a large part of their diet. So this may have been part of some sort of complex that was here at one time. Really incredible views here by the river. The Tocobaga Indians were great hunters, and over a period of time they developed tools, and they hunted a lot of game in these areas, including deer, armadillos, squirrels, even manatees, which were abundant in these waters at that time. And they ate nuts and berries that grew in the area. They also grew corn. Now, many are unsure how they got corn here, but there's speculation that they traded with northern tribes and were able to grow corn in these areas. Following this area into the woods for a little ways, and you can see part of this mound formation that continues on. The natives built these mounds along the rivers, creeks all throughout Florida. And they were high vantage points along these areas in those times. You can imagine the perspective the natives would have had along top of many of these mounds. Very tall at one time. You could see them from long distance down the river. And they often indicated village sites, territories. Exploring further into the woods here, came across another formation here. Appears to be a mound, and not too far from the mound I was just exploring, so it's possible this is connected to that area as well, and part of one large complex that was here. Would have been a very active area long ago. The natives had these village sites, but they often would go out for days at a time, if not weeks, on hunts, and stay at various quarry sites and other mound areas where they would do their hunts and build tools, make weapons, things like that, and often return back to these village sites here. Maybe on top of this mound. Nice bluff here along the river.